Thank you, everybody, for coming to tonight's Board of Ed meeting. Happy to have everybody out in between the raindrops. Hello, Matt. Just a quick open public meeting statement. In accordance with the requirements of the Open Public Meeting Act, Chapter 231, PL 1975 announcement, I wish to announce that the New Jersey Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public have advance notice and to attend the public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the school districts of the Chatham Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time thereof posted at the board administrative offices, sent to the clerks of the borough and the township, the Chatham libraries, the Courier, the Daily Record, the Star Ledger, and the Independent Press. Mr. DeQuilla, would you mind doing a roll call?
My pleasure. Mr. Gilfillan. Ms. Ciccarelli.
Here.
Ms. Clark.
Here.
Mr. Connors.
Here.
Ms. Cronin.
Here.
Mr. Brand. Ms. Kenny.
Here.
Mr. Nonamaker. And Ms. Weber.
Yes, here.
Seven present.
Thank you. Would everybody stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody, again for coming. It's very exciting, the end of the year, action-packed. I don't have any additional comments other than welcome, and any additional comments I may defer to Mr. Connors at the beginning of the public commentary. So without further ado, we're going to move over to Dr. LaSousa for the superintendent's report.
All right, thank you, Ms. Weber. A couple of quick ones. Number one, it's graduation Friday night. So if any of you signed up for the cap and gown, I think I have it next door. So after the meeting, maybe you can just run in there and get it. Number two, we had a very successful speaker series the past week and a half or so with some really dynamic and interesting people who came in to talk in the district. I thank those of you who managed to get to one or more of those presentations, and they will all be available on the website in short order, probably within a week or so, once we do the editing and they take care of that. And then the third item, I just wanted to, we finally, after a long year, have concluded all of the administration and festivities surrounding Park. And I wanted to just give a quick update because it was something that I had intended to do when the year began, just to give kind of a quick summary of how things went and what impact Park had on the district when we went through the administration. So I've got like an 8 slide quick presentation to give. I forgot my remote mouse, so I'll just kind of go back and forth and quickly go through this.
With your broken foot, good timing.
Yes.
Can I ask you a quick question on the speaker series before we jump
Sure.
into that topic? Do you envision bringing back some of the same speakers next year, brand new speakers, a combination?
I hadn't anticipated bringing any of them back, though one of them volunteered to come back. So
Ryan?
we'll see. Yes, Ryan Bloom. He was absolutely dynamite.
Okay, excellent.
So just as a super fast recap, and again, I apologize for not having the remote control, but this was the first year that we implemented or administered the Partnership for the Assessment of Readiness of Colleges and Careers, the PARC tests. PARC, of course, is intended to measure the Common Core, and New Jersey is one of about 10 or so PARC states, so that's a gradually shrinking number. So just to, again, recap some of what took place before we got to this year. We piloted PARC last year in the second half of the year, 2013-14. We made a number of technology upgrades, in part in preparation for PARC, but not wholly because of PARC. So we were already moving towards the purchase of more and more Chromebooks, but certainly that the need for them was bolstered by the PARC delivery. Right now, today, we have about 2,200 Chromebooks in use in the district. And of course, we also have many, many laptops and desktops and so forth. And we've gotten those Chromebooks through our own technology purchases and also through various grants that we have been fortunate enough to receive from CEF or from the PTOs and support groups like that. And then we've expanded our wireless access points throughout our buildings so that almost in all of our buildings, just about anywhere you are, you have access to the internet. And that took some balancing, especially when we were administering Park at the high school. We went through all the mandated training that the DOE provided us. We turnkeyed that, starting with Karen down to the site-based coordinators and then to the teachers, and most of that training for the teachers took place early winter because the DOE hadn't rolled out some of their training sessions until then. So some of the challenges that we faced moving from NJ Ask and HESPA to Park. First, scheduling was a little bit more difficult, and the reason for that, and I'm going to illustrate some of these challenges in a second with numbers, but we didn't, Park, the testing windows and the time kids were testing for Park was much greater than for NJ Ask or HESPA. And of course, at the high school level, we only had been accustomed to testing kids in 11th grade, whereas with Park, we tested students in 9th, 10th, and 11th grade predominantly. We also, of course, like many districts, faced an opt-out movement or wave, and these had to do with students or their parents who refused to participate in the tests. So we followed the guidance from the DOE, and we tried to to be faithful to what those folks at the DOE told us to do. But in spite of that, refusals grew as the year went on, and those numbers changed all of the time, including on the very morning of the tests. So it was difficult, or it was a challenge just for us to manage that. And then naturally, in part as a result of the test refusals, the capacity that we have just with respect to staff members was stretched because a lot of them had to deal with delivering the tests, and then we had to supervise both the testing environments and non-testing environments. And again, that was most difficult at the high school. So just to give you a sort of a snapshot of the number of minutes over the course of a full year that NJ Ask and HESPA took versus Park, and it's not, again, a perfect comparison because HESPA was not administered in 9th or 10th grade, it was just an 11th grade test. And also, to be fair, the minutes there on that right-hand column where you see lots of 600s, 650s, that was the time that the DOE originally cited or directed that we should allocate towards testing. And they also said in the same breath that most students would not take that much time, so we probably wouldn't need that much time, and that, in fact, was the case. But just in terms of planning and blocking out periods during which students would be, in a particular testing session, that's the difference. And you can see then that just with respect to pure minutes, Park was twice as impactful or took up twice as much time, more than twice as much time as NJ Ask and HESPA. I selected 5 people in the district who probably bore the brunt of Park administration, and that's not to say that other folks did not have to engage in Park-related activities. So whether it was our teachers or our principals or other supervisors or other technology staff, certainly the hours would rise, would increase drastically if I included all staff members involved in one way or another in Park administration. But you can see by these folks here, I asked them to log their hours doing various Park-related activities throughout the year. And again, this illustrates how at the high school level in particular and at the middle school, the task was enormous. And some of these people, Doug Walker, Pete Trebor, they had to freeze pretty much everything else they were doing for long stretches of time just to deal with scheduling and scheduling changes and making sure that we were doing everything we were supposed to do. And then, as I mentioned, the refusal rates. So as you know, I spoke about this a whole bunch of times, but the DOE has confirmed since Park administration that 95% is the rate of participation that's required. And what the DOE says is that comes from the feds. The federal government is the entity that establishes the participation rates. So you can see that first off, it's almost a straight line, that the higher the grade level, the greater the refusal rate. So the lower the participation rate, the higher you go. And then in every grade level, 3rd and 4th, not so much, but at every grade level still, the refusal rate grew from the first administration to the second administration. And you can see there, the 11th grade, we know statewide was the, ground zero for test refusals. And there are lots of reasons for that. So looking into next year, kind of wrapping this up, we've had a flurry of activity around Park and Common Core in the past couple of weeks, as you know. I was at a workshop with the Commissioner of Education on May 27th. He didn't mention a thing about the Common Core and stated very clearly that no district would face financial penalties for a low participation rate. But he also said that pretty much any district with a participation rate below 95% would have some kind of corrective action plan put in place, and most likely that action plan would involve additional informational sessions at which districts would be required to emphasize the talking points that the DOE produces around Park. So we'll await that. We'll see what, when that shoe kind of drops on us. They've also announced in the past couple of weeks that there will not be 2 testing windows next year, but only 1, and that the total number of sessions will be reduced as well. But we're short on details and don't know exactly what that will entail. And then finally, as we all know, Governor Christie had mentioned recently that New Jersey would begin to at least review, possibly or probably move away from Common Core and back to a state-based model, which is where we were up until 2010. But in so doing, we would stay with Park, and certainly the commissioner emphasized that Park wouldn't go anywhere throughout the review process, and that his anticipation was that the review would entail a renovation, not a tear down. So for us, we will wait and hope that the DOE gives us some directives and guidance, and whatever action plans we have to follow we'll know about early next school year. Then we'll also make some logistical adjustments based on whatever the changes are to the test window periods and the number of sessions that we have to comply with. And then finally, possibly for us, one of the questions that remains is what effect the low participation rate will have on the data that the DOE typically provides for us. So if we only have 25% of our juniors who completed the Park, and typically our junior scores have been what's used in the reports that the DOE puts on the website, that in turn is used by publications to rank the high school. If we don't have valid data, we don't know what will happen. Will they leave those sections blank on our report? If so, will that lead to Chatham not being mentioned in some of these publications? Maybe a good or a bad thing, depending on your point of view. But that's something that kind of remains to be seen. I would anticipate that Chatham would not appear in at least a couple of these types of rankings next year because there won't be data available for the student population. But we'll wait and see on that. So that is a quick summary. Happy to take any questions from the board. Yes, ma'am.
As you can imagine. Knowing what we know now, would you block out next year the same amount of time because you have to block out the max, or would you try and use the time, because you had to block out, the 600, the 650. Is there room for adjustment there?
Yeah, I know that some of Karen might be able to speak to this better than I can. Some of the sessions we came closer to needing all of the time, and others was like not even anywhere near the amount of time.
Do we have the flexibility to adjust those?
Yes, I think we have the ability to, once all students finish the testing, to release them or make alternative plans.
Okay. And then my second question was the hours spent by some of the administrators there, the 911 hours. Again, having gone through it a year, this past year, is there some economy of scale that number will be repeated, or should that be reduced, having gone through it, or is every task going to have to happen year over year, and we're always looking at the 911 hours?
I'm sure it'll be reduced no matter what, because it's our second time through, and because we only will have 1 window as opposed to 2.
Okay.
We definitely kind of emptied the offices from a technology perspective in that like first week or so, where when we were first administering at each building, we wanted to make sure we had all hands on deck. The technology held up largely speaking. We didn't have any huge technology related problems, so we probably didn't need as many hands as we thought we did. And the teachers, of course, living it, for a year, are not going to have the same level of need next year, I don't think, when they do it again.
Okay. The goal is just to put the resources back to
Yep.
where they belong. And sorry, Rich, my final question is, when we're down to 9 states that are involved,
It's about that number, yep.
at its peak, was it in the 20s?
I want to say it was 26 or 22 or something like that in terms of development of the
Okay.
assessment.
So
But I
this-
could be wrong. I'd have to go online and look at
Okay, I
that.
think it was somewhere in the 20s. So at its peak, only half the states, and in a very short period of time, we're down to 9 or 10.
Yep.
Okay, and we have to wait for the state to decide if we're in or out. Okay.
Correct.
Sorry, Rich, you had a...
And I apologize if this was touched upon. One of the concerns that we heard a lot about was the effect that the results of the test would have on a child's ability to get into an honors program or an AP program. That was, I think, why you saw it really tail off as the children got into the higher grades. I mean, my understanding is it had no impact whatsoever with regard to this part test, but first of all, was that my understanding correct?
At the high school level, there was never, the DOE issued guidance after Park had begun that Park scores would not be included or should not be included on transcripts. So there was a lot of confusion statewide about that, and that's what prompted the DOE to issue the letter that they did. At the elementary level, we've always used state scores as one of many measures to look at when we're evaluating placement for a student. As you saw, 3rd and 4th grade will probably be able to continue to do that. I'm not sure beyond that because the rates of participation start to drop off.
I can appreciate that it didn't make the transcripts, but does it still affect the placement of a student in high school into an honors program or an AP, let's just say for whatever. For example, a student just...
Excuse me, Rich, is your mic on?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I have to do that.
I understand, I heard what you said, it doesn't hit the radar, it doesn't hit the transcript, but does it still play any role whatsoever from the administration, the school's perspective, as to whether a child can be qualified for an AP or an honors? I mean, that was a big concern that a lot of the public was making, and quite frankly, it sounded legitimate.
At the high school, it's never played a role except as kids enter 9th grade because we've only had NJ Ask in 8th grade. We have to wait and see what the results look like, because another concern that we have is even though whatever the number was, let's just say 85% of kids in 8th grade may have taken the test, we don't know what percentage of those kids kind of blew the test off even though they technically sat for the test, because we had some of that going on. So we've asked the DOE, and the DOE says they're going to be able to drill down a little bit into each individual test to let us know if the scores should be considered legitimate or not. So 8th grade is something, we have to wait and see what these results actually look like before we consider using them for any other purpose.
Oh, so there is a possibility that at some point the district may start using the results of these standardized tests as to whether, with regard to the decision to place a junior in an AP class as a senior.
I don't,
Maybe I'm
based on based on these scores, based on the rate of participation, Rich, we would continue to follow the practice we've always followed, which is high school, it has no impact.
Thank you.
But we may continue to follow the practice that in the grades from 8 to 4, basically, it could be one of many measures that we would look at.
Thank you very much.
I just want to clarify something. Somebody else going?
Yeah, you can go.
Oh, all right. That originally, they had said it needed to be on the transcript. And then everybody made a big stink, and they came back and they said, as of now, we will not require it. So they didn't say not forever. They left it very vague so that there was that option to potentially say, okay, now going forward, we want it to be on. So I just want to be clear on that. So I think that was the reason why a lot of the high school kids opted out. So, okay.
I just want to loop back 2 things. First of all, just to talk about the test itself. As I know you were at these meetings at the state level and talking about if this is truly a measure to assess the Common Core. I know there are some questions as to whether this test truly is aligned. And I would hope that as a district and attending these meetings that we're pushing hard and firm to see that this is this truly the fairest test for our students to test the standards in which we're teaching. The second thing is I too have had questions about Park impacting placement more though into the middle school, into the accelerated programs at the middle school. And the initial response back that was even last year before, I think it was in one of these meetings, it was told that these initial scores this year will not be used as an indicator. So I think if that is the, I don't know, Ms. Chase, do you have information about that? That these initial Park scores would not be used for placement whenever they come back. Let's say they come back in October first, so that would be kids rolling up the following school year, since it's the first time and we really have nothing to compare them to. This is a totally different animal than NJ Ask, and we need to give, out of fairness for those kids. So I don't know, this is something, if you're prepared to answer it now or something we need to look at how we're going to place those kids in the middle school.
So as Dr. Lusus said, that we've never used any standardized test as the sole criteria for entrance into a program. I emailed all the parents in grade 5 about the placement process. We try to capture as much data as possible. I don't know what kind of information will even be included in these score reports or how valid they will be. So it's really not possible to mention that we would definitely use them. It would certainly be a data point on students. Like I said, we try to capture as much data as possible on a student over the course of time, but it would never be the sole measure or criteria by which we place students.
No, absolutely, it never has been. But I'm just saying, to compare Park scores to NJS scores, it's like apples and
Right.
oranges.
Even though that's precisely what the state is doing to come up with the teacher evaluation rating. Just to be clear.
Just because you couldn't help yourself.
All right.
Does anybody else have any additional questions for Dr. LaSousa or Ms. Chase regarding the Park presentation?
Thank you.
Going once. Dr. LaSousa, did you have any additional comments as part of your superintendent report?
I did not.
Thank you. Mr. DeQuilla, when you're ready.
I just wanted to report a brief energy savings improvement plan, or as it becomes to be known in reference ESIP update. There are 6 resolutions up for board approval tonight that are required by the law and handle all legal aspects for approving the plan, approving the architect, energy serving the company, and letting the district go out for its funding. So we are proceeding according to schedule. Just wanted to keep everybody updated on that.
Okay.
That's all I have.
And the benefits of that start rolling in immediately or not until 15-16 or 16-17?
And possibly, depending on the project timetable, some of maybe the end of 15-16, but most likely into the following school year.
Okay. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. DeQuilla on the ESEP program? Seeing none, we're going to roll into the committee reports, starting with personnel. Ms. Clark?
Personnel has not met since our last meeting.
Thank you. Ms. Kenny for curriculum?
Curriculum met prior to this meeting. We discussed the CMS math program and went over the various materials that have been shared with us. Karen Chase is working on steps for implementation in September as it relates to teacher development, homework practices, and resources and support. In addition, we met with Dennis Sheeran, and he is our candidate for on the agenda for the K-12 math supervisor. He currently works in Edison as the 6-12 math supervisor, and we're hoping that he will be a positive force for the district. And last but not definitely not least, we met with Kristen Crawford, and she is on the agenda tonight as the candidate for the K-12 science supervisor. She's currently a K-6 math science coach in River's Edge, and she struck a chord with us as with her focus on the integration, on the importance of the integration of math, science, and language arts. And we expect her to bring the district along as we move towards the next generation science standards. And we'll hopefully, as we approve her, excited to have her on board.
Just a quick question, is the new supervisor starting in the summertime?
July 1 is the appointment.
July 1, okay. And Ms. Chase, those items that Ms. Kenny mentioned, those are all happening concurrently? The improvements and some of the addressing, those will happen, now and then when Dennis hits the ground on July 1? Oh,
Yes, I've already had conversations with Mr. Sheeran about the ideas for improving the resources available for the math program. And we are going to be working on that over the summer so that there are improvements made for September. And also, Ms. Crawford and I have begun to have conversations about the implementation of the next-gen science standards. So once they're appointed on July 1st, we'll continue our conversations, and hopefully things will be up and running for September.
okay. Great, thank you. And maybe Kristen can continue our conversation on the likelihood of a shark attack in the summer waters of New Jersey. So thank you and welcome aboard. Welcome, welcome. Does anybody else have any additional questions for Ms. Chase or Ms. Kenny on curriculum or Dr. LaSousa? Seeing none, moving along. Finance and Facilities, Mr. Gilfillan.
Yes, the Finance and Facility Committee just met prior to this meeting. One of the topics was the ESIP program that Mr. DeCola already went into. Second was the small investment that we're making at the high school baseball field in order to resod the infield. And last but not least was the continued discussion based around the referendum and what we've been considering in terms of the legacy aspects of the referendum and what we would consider moving forward with in terms of potentially bringing back a referendum to the taxpayers of Chatham. We continue to focus on the following. One would be the refurb of the high school auditorium. Second would be the refurb of the middle school auditorium. The renovations in the addition of turf fields behind the high school. The changes at the Cougar Field, including the new bleachers. The middle school classes, which we not purely focused, but highly focused on the STEM program, and then also the grade school classrooms at Milton Avenue, Washington, as well as Southern Boulevard. The issue, what we're doing right now, what we are going to do our best to go forward is now through a number of different avenues, is trying to gauge support for all of these individual initiatives. What we would do potentially going forward in terms of either doing them on an individual basis, doing them at different time frames, stagger them. What we're looking for is potentially some form of feedback from the community as to what the appetite is for all the individual pieces of a potential referendum, where true support lies within each of these different pieces of the referendum before we would move forward with that. So we have figures associated with all of them, what we believe the price tags are for each. But right now we are more focused on what the structure of and what we would believe is the best portions of these pieces to put forward to the public, or is it all of them? Is that the best avenue? We are highly focused on that, so we will be taking as much feedback from the board as well as finding ways to try to gauge the community and what we can look for from a support level of each of these initiatives. We next meet in August. Well, we next meet in August, but I would be highly surprised if we didn't have something called before that.
Matt, is it the recommendation of the committee, or could you even weigh in on if the auditoriums remain the top priority as they had been for the last couple of years?
Yes. We said it directly after the last referendum, which was that the intent when we went in was the arts, and we continue to believe that is the highest level of focus for us going forward, and that we continue to look back at the historical spend and where we've invested in this community, and the arts is where we have spent nothing compared to what we've invested in from a curricular perspective, a field perspective, as well as classrooms in particular up at the high school, as well as the previous referendum, which dealt with issues at the grade schools. So our desire is to continue to support the arts and try to move forward with an opportunity to renovate the auditoriums at both the high school and the middle school.
And just quickly on the turf of the baseball fields, I'm sorry, not the turf, the sod, would that work take place over the summer?
Yes, it'd be start in July.
Okay, and be playable for
Correct, next year.
next spring?
Mhm.
Okay. Is that field used ever in the fall for any type of fall ball, or?
No.
The infield is not, the outfield is.
Okay.
We'd only be working on the infield, which will be roped and sectioned off to eliminate any traffic so that the grass can take.
Okay. And does grass take a week to take, or do we need from now till next spring?
Once the work is begun, you will need from now to next spring.
Okay. Not up on my turf, maybe Kristen can help me on turf science, but sod, sorry.
Grass.
Grass, I apologize.
Matt, excuse me,
Yes,
how much was the infield improvement?
$15,000, which was well below what we originally thought.
Okay. Was there any discussion, I thought we were possibly thinking of just making it dirt?
Getting it, but
Yeah.
the price came in, I'm sorry, Matt.
Oh, yeah, actually, well, I actually would have supported continuing to have grass from an aesthetic perspective, from a playing perspective. I think it's better for an
It's a
infield
chore.
than it is for dirt.
So again, the entire infield will be replaced by new sod, is what's being
The grass
proposed?
portion,
The grass
yes.
portion.
Yeah.
Is there additional work that needs to happen to the running, the track portion of it, the clay? Or no, we've made all
That's an
those
annual
improvements?
figure. That's an annual figure.
The clay was all redone in the spring, and it'll get some minor updates and,
Okay.
where they dig in the batter's box or dig in the pitcher's mound, always gets.
So that's annual, that's part of the annual maintenance?
Nothing major, that's just part of the annual district maintenance for the clay portion.
Okay, thank you.
Peter, you probably will answer. Has the contractor who worked on the high school repaired the field that was damaged as a result of the work done there, the JV field and around there? Has that been repaired yet?
It has, they were waiting once everything done, all the earth has been moved, and it should all be reseeded and done. I don't know if JV ultimately ever played on the field this year or not. I don't believe they did, but I'm not 100% sure.
Does anybody else have any additional questions for Matt or Peter? No, seeing none. Policy and planning, Mr. Franz had a prior commitment, but the policy committee has not met since our last meeting. So moving on to liaison reports, Mr. Connors for Chatham Borough.
Nothing to report as related to the Board of Ed.
Thank you. The township, Ms. Clark.
Nothing to report from the township.
Back to you, Mr. Connors, for the athletic boosters.
The athletic boosters' last meeting was on June 2nd. Unfortunately, I could not make it. I hope somebody did.
I was at the valedictorian dinner.
Okay. So unfortunately, I have nothing to report from the boosters' last meeting. Sorry about that.
Very good.
Not a lot of boosting going on.
The music theater boosters report, I will do that. So we just wanted to say congratulations to freshman alto singer Elizabeth Stewart. She has been named to the 2015 All-National Choir, and Elizabeth will be traveling to Nashville in October to perform with the other members of the best singers from every high school, from high schools around the United States. At a recent Morris County Teen Arts Festival, freshman Charlie Thompson and Eaton Miller won a gold medal for Best Group Performance in a Dramatic Theater. And in addition, there were a number of students who were also recognized for outstanding performances. Anastasia Artavides for an outstanding solo performance. We had Elizabeth and Alex Stewart for outstanding duo performance at a coffee house. And Lisa Costello and Derek Walsh also for outstanding performance in a coffee house. Moving away a little bit from the performing arts and over to the visual arts, we had Nicole Kay's drawing. It was called Among the Branches. She was selected as the Best in Show piece of art, and Nicole's drawing will be featured on the cover of the 2015 Morris County Teen Arts Festival program. So congratulations to Nicole. And also the Select Choir and Chatham Voices will be performing at the annual baccalaureate, which takes place at Corpus Christi on Wednesday night at 7:30. The select choir will also, and the combined bands will also end the year on a high note with performances also at graduation Friday night at Menon Arena. I believe that starts at 6:30, correct? Okay, that is the music theater report. Recreation, Mr. Nonamaker is not available, and PTO district cabinet meeting, Ms. Cronin, have they met
They had their luncheon. I don't know, did anything happen at the luncheon? I didn't go there.
besides eating?
I couldn't get there. Ms. Chase went in my stead.
The PTO luncheon.
The district cabinet?
Oh, yes, that was wonderful.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, we're not really
I
concerned
just-
about the menu, we're actually more concerned.
I
interested.
didn't eat anything, but it was a fantastic day to spend with those folks. I know they dedicate a lot of time and support for the district. So we talked about the new website that will be, the changes that will be taking place to our website, and as well as some of the and other initiatives that we have in the district. And then they were going to focus on their meeting because they had a shift in leadership.
Okay.
So they were going to roll out those new roles. But it was great. Again, those folks dedicate a tremendous amount of time like you all do, so it was great to spend the afternoon with them.
Oh, fun. They do spend a tremendous amount of time and effort for the district. Thank you for the report. Sorry you didn't get to eat.
Sorry to put you on the spot like that, too.
No,
Oh, that's all right.
Anytime.
I would like to make a motion to approve the minutes of the June 1st, 2015 public session.
Second.
Oh, yes. Nice.
I will defer to
He's quick.
Rich has given that one to Ann. All those in favor?
Aye.
Against? Abstentions? None? John, okay. Very good. Thank you. Mr. Connors, I just wanted to give you an opportunity before our public commentary session. You had wanted to address the board.
Yes, as you know, the last couple of meetings, I've teed up an issue regarding the vote, and I'd like to have that again addressed at public commentary, which is at the end.
Board business.
I'm sorry, board business, which is at the end, so if people are here and they want to speak their piece regarding the possible moving of the vote, I hopefully you'll give it. But I do want, hopefully we can address this and get more of a discussion from other board members other than me.
Okay. So you're looking for some opinions and straw polls or whatever. You're looking for whatever.
I don't want to be chopping wood if it's a waste of time.
Okay, very good. Okay, so we have our first opportunity for public commentary. The agenda, if you could sign in, we do public commentary, then we'll do our regular action agenda, and then we have another opportunity for public commentary toward the end if something sparks your interest during the action items. So, oh, there's no sign. Is it over there? Mr. DeQuill, is there a sign-in sheet? And the typical format for those that don't join us too often, sign in, introduce yourself, if you would, indicate address or borough township, and then we're all yours.
Thank you. Marielle Kulker, I'm here representing Chatham Education Foundation, and I'm just here to present to the district a check in the amount of $4,000 for the STEM Summer Institute sponsored by Global Learning and our very own in-house spectacular teacher, Shay Coleman, who runs it. So far, this is actually going to subsidize all of the teachers that attend from Chatham District to participate as students, and also pays some of them to participate as presenters. And so for $4,000, Mr. DeQuilla, I will give this to you. And so far this year, thank you. So far this year, that this brings the total to $116,000 that Chatham Education Foundation has given to the district. And that is the largest amount that we've given to date, and of course it's due to our wonderful donors and also the spectacular teachers that we have in Chatham. And we're just under the $1 million mark as in the 10 years that we've been in business. So next year.
Next year for sure. Thank you. Thank you to everybody. Thank you to everybody that donates.
Jane Devlin, Chatham Township. Thank you to the board and Dr. LaSousa and his administrative staff present at the Board of Ed meetings for respectfully listening each time I approached in attempt to open and advance the dialogue concerning district and homework. Thank you for not dismissing it as prattle. I trust you see I am coming forth out of genuine kindness as well as concern for and interest in children and teens, and that my platform is one of advocacy with an eye towards solutions to help our youth manage all they have to navigate during their K through 12 years, homework being just one consuming event, so that stressors leading to maladaptive behaviors are reduced and well-being is safeguarded. And speaking of genuine concern, may I pause a moment to extend appreciation to the board, the superintendent, and his administrative staff for the many programs, decisions, and initiatives that were rolled out this year or projected in planning stages. Clearly, each of you, in good faith, devoted your time, energy, efforts, and expertise at large. Your genuine concern and interest in the students and the school district is above debate. I do urge, as planning is underway for the 2015-16 school year, that homework is on the list. A first start might be to really analyze how essential homework is during holidays and breaks. That wouldn't be a radical change, just a start. How essential is homework every weekend for all grades? Is homework even necessary on weekends for grades K through 8? Do our teachers need more support? Are we missing creative alternatives? Last year, when we still had NJS, some teachers still gave homework that week, traditionally a blackout week, because we were told they ran behind in assignments. Weekend homework was sometimes doubled. And this year, homework was the rule, not the exception, in middle school on weekends. How come no one is questioning this? And speaking of asking, when did it become the norm, or at least how come it is the norm for the high school students to get class assignments now for next year that come along with summer homework from some teachers, even arguably if it's said to be because it's honors or AP classes? It's still high school, and the goal shouldn't be, in essence, to bypass being a high schooler and do college at age 14, 15, 17. Teens aren't even done the finals of this school year, let alone having a summer break before hearing about next year's rigors. That includes being encouraged to partake in summer enrichments, even the undergrad students, so as not to lose one's edge. Guard against the summer slide, to use the jargon. At least when you are still in grades K through 8, the only summer slide that should be on your mind is the water slide. And even teens in high school should be taught, perhaps by our example, to take into account there is more to life than increasing its speed. Gandhi said that, not me. Or as another author said, learn to pause, or nothing else worthwhile will catch up to you. So again, I am volunteering my time and interest in the homework matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Devlin.
Hi, I'm Carrie Conti, Chatham Township. I'm here on behalf of Chatham Cares About Schools. We wanted to congratulate you guys in your selection of Mr. Sheeran. We're very excited that you all have found a wonderful addition, I'm sure, to our school district. I wanted to kind of put out there, a while ago there was a curriculum liaison with every school, Washington Avenue, Milton, Southern, Lafayette. Everybody had a parent volunteer, or there was a curriculum liaison. And I would just urge, that's no more in existence. And I think as we're rolling into this, evolving, trying to find out what the standards are going to be going forward, if we could have that position be reinstated, have more of a voice from parents that can communicate better with the administration, with the board, with the superintendent and assistant superintendent, and now the director of math, science, language arts, and everything. I just think it's a very good communication resource for all of us to know what's going on in the foxholes at home, on the battlefield, in the school district, and then at a higher level, what you guys are trying to do from a big picture perspective. So that's just something that I would urge that you all would consider going forward. And thank you, Lada, for reviewing all the material that we gave you. We appreciate it. Thanks.
Carrie, can I ask you a quick question? I'm sorry.
Sure.
The curriculum liaison committee, was that an appointed position? And I'm showing my age here a little bit, so I apologize.
Yeah. It was a PTO, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so each PTO would just ask for a volunteer. And then, to be honest with you, I wasn't the curriculum coordinator, so I don't know exactly. I'll do it. I'll volunteer, but
But I do remember.
were you that?
meeting
Did
with-
you do that, Michelle?
We used to meet with a group.
I think I was Southern Boulevard. I'm Okay. rolling back the years. But it was PTO, and we met, I think, maybe twice. Mike, I feel like at that point you were the assistant superintendent, so we maybe met twice or 3 times a year to troubleshoot or just to kind of give feedback. It wasn't even necessarily troubleshooting, it was more of a conversation.
My question is, did the PTO eliminate that position?
I don't know where it went. I just was on it for the 1 or 2 years.
We can't hear you from the audience, so you'd have to come up. I can hear you, but it wouldn't be picked up on the recording.
I'm going to chime in because I'm here. I did that for about 3 years, 3 years straight consecutively, and I think I started, at Lafayette into the middle school. And personally, it was incredibly instructive for me as a parent, and having lived in Chatham for 20 years. I was working with Ann Dudley at the time, and I learned a lot even about the vendors, such as the people who administered NJ Ask and how that worked, and when changes were made, and how that affected the results of the tests going from 4th grade to 5th grade, et cetera, et cetera. So it was all very instructive. Where it broke down, where I think the purpose of that role, and maybe with Ann leaving and some things changing, I don't know why it no longer exists. But what I'm wondering is if part of what broke down is that the idea was we met about 4 or 5 times a year, and we also worked on things that speakers who would come that would be relevant to curriculum, brainstormed, and would inform us about things. And the idea was then that those point people would go back to, and this was more before there was as much emailing, et cetera, you'd go back to then each respective PTO meeting, and you report at the PTO meeting, and I'm guessing, I'm just saying this, at that time there were probably more people in attendance at the monthly PTO meetings, whether it was during the day or in the evening. And that was the way the communication was supposed to go back and forth. And then at the PTO meeting, maybe you presented something that happened. At the curriculum meeting with the assistant superintendent, the parents would respond, and the idea was to go back and forth. I think that kind of broke down at some point. Again, I can't tell you why. I have just some thoughts about maybe why.
Thank you.
But I agree that if there could be a system or an idea of how that could work again, not just through email, but with personal conversation and talking, that it's worthwhile.
Okay.
Whatever that's worth.
Thank you. Marianne, would you mind signing in now that you've...
Sorry.
No worries.
Just to chime in, Mrs. Hauck is right. So that committee was meeting regularly through last year. We discussed at length at the curriculum committee level of the board that the feedback is spot on, that the feedback from some of the parents was that when they would go back to the PTO meetings, there weren't very many folks there in attendance, so it was difficult to get any kind of message or communication out. And sometimes they were not comfortable themselves fielding questions about detailed issues that had been discussed. So that this year, our aim was to do more evening presentations. We did 2, one around the Common Core and Park ELA in the beginning of the year. We did another one on STEM that got bumped 2 meetings in a row because of snowstorms, but we ended up having it in April, if my mind serves me. So moving into next year, then we'll evaluate how things went this year. And the thinking was there would be PTO reps at those meetings in the evening to bring back information, but that may or may not have happened the way we envisioned.
Okay. Kim, when you meet with the PTO district cabinets, can you inquire about if those positions are still on the
Yeah, I think
on their docket?
like Mike said, that there was a decision that the way they were going to go about, instead of Karen having meetings. So
But if we're going to reevaluate it,
Yeah, but feedback was to tell the PTO not to have the positions.
Okay.
Because there weren't gonna be these meetings with Karen anymore.
Okay.
But they, I'm sure, would be happy to add
Okay.
that.
So I actually, I'm Kelly Loofborough, and I can speak to that very directly because I am one of the curriculum reps. So what it is now, though, is that we would just go to that meeting and report back to PTO. But as Dr. LaSousa mentioned, and Ms. Hoke, I was a part of those 2 years where the breakdown was happening, and we were identifying that no one's at the PTO meeting that you're reporting back to. We write something up in the newsletter, and not too many people are reading it. So it really wasn't the best, in my opinion and in the opinion of the people involved, it wasn't the best forum for getting the information. We were getting this great information in these meetings, and then in order to really inform the parent community, there was a big gap. And so I think the move to having them in the evenings and having people come out to hear that information is a good start, and I just think that that conversation needs to still really be an active conversation. I don't think the right solution has been found, and I hope that we continue that conversation, and I'm happy to be a part of that conversation because I think it's a really important piece. I feel like parents just aren't getting the information that they need to really understand the programs that are being offered and to answer many of the questions they have about the current curriculum changes and evolutions.
Kelly, do you get a sense, sorry,
Yeah.
just since you're there, do you get a sense that having the public meetings, these meetings where these presentations take place, videotaped, is it getting any more airtime, or in your opinion, you're not hearing that?
I do feel like that got more airtime. I don't know how many people, I mean, there wasn't great presence at the STEM presentation.
I'm sorry, you said there was or there wasn't?
There was not. And I do think that was partly like, it would be great to have an email blast from the schools that this is happening that evening. I think that's a really important piece of communication. We get them for remembering to sign up to get your yearbook. We should have it for remember this curriculum presentations at the Board of Ed the hour before tonight.
Right.
And I also think that keeping them videotaped and having people go on, I don't know how many people viewed it, but I'm hoping maybe it was another 100 people, which at least that's a step forward.
Okay. I just wanted to tap you since you're at the mic.
Yeah, no
Thank
problem.
you.
Thanks.
Any additional public commentary during the first session? Again, there's an additional session after we go through the action items, so if something sparks your interest, there'll be another opportunity. So we're going to move on to the regular action items. We're going to start with personnel. Ms. Clark?
I move personnel agenda items A1 through A18 on the regular agenda and item A19 on the addendum.
Let me just mention very,
Seconded by,
let me just mention, since we're on that, we've got 14 or 15 appointments on this agenda. We've been really busy trying to become fully staffed for next year. We have a couple of positions left. There's a French position that we need to fill due to one of the resignations on the agenda. We do need to add a section of first grade and second grade at Southern Boulevard School, so we're working on that. I've got those candidates on my calendar by the end of this week. And aside from that, we're pretty close. Maybe only one or two more aside from that. So we're pretty good. And then typically, invariably, we'll get one resignation that we never would have anticipated in a million years happen 3 weeks from now, and then we'll be back at it. But at least going into the summer, we're in pretty good shape, and it's kudos to the people out in the buildings who are pouring through candidates and getting them up to me.
can I ask you a question? I know the Personnel Committee hasn't met. Dr. LaSousa, there's an opportunity to, obviously not this moment, but maybe the next budget year, to add, or at least look at some of the maintenance and the physical facilities, and it just seems they're so understaffed and overworked, and they do a tremendous job, and possibly I'm going to leave the door open for Mr. Connors to mention the athletic trainer or get assistance for even a part-time athletic trainer. And again, we don't need to address it right now, but since we're on personnel, I'd like it to be on the radar, and maybe the Personnel Committee can see if there's some way to, Peter, I mean, is it a true statement that they are fairly tapped, our maintenance and facilities folks?
The maintenance and facilities individuals have a full plate, and you know, if you could say they could work as many hours in a day as you want them to work. So,
Right.
you know, having more where, you know, we don't even have, we barely have a maintenance person for each building in the district, never mind all the work orders and items that we'd like to address.
Right, and I think it starts to show a little bit, and it's not to say they're not working hard, not at all, I just think they need more resources. I mean, our buildings are old and they just need more attention. And certainly our athletic trainer could use some help. We just don't have enough, and this is certainly Mr. Connors, he's brought this up for years and years and years and years, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm more than happy to go on again. It's wrong.
Is your mic on?
No, I'm sorry, just for those you may not know, at athletic events, you usually have a trainer, and the problem is when we have multiple events going on at the same time, perhaps a game at Haas and a game at Cougar, we only have one, my understanding is one full-time trainer. Who does a great job, by the way, and if your children have played sports, you'll know what I'm talking about. And I believe we should be adding to the budget another full-time trainer for that very reason, to cover both spots. So that's my soapbox statement with regard to the need for an additional athletic trainer.
And that, could that be added as a second question? Because it's something that would be an ongoing expense. You know, is that, Peter, is that something that could be added as a second question if the public decides that that is a critical need?
Yes, it could be in next year, in part of next year's budget, with the issue that if it passes, it gets added and stays in the budget.
Okay.
If it fails, we have to wait a year to address the issue.
Okay, understood. I just, like Mr. Connors, I'm just concerned from a safety point of view, not having coverage at both fields.
I can tell you an event occurred where there was at the end of a lacrosse game, a player from the other team got hurt at the very end of the game. Somebody had gotten hurt down at Haas, and the trainer was down at Haas, and we basically, thankfully, there was a parent, a Chatham parent, who worked for the emergency squad, actually went down and rendered aid. And thankfully that the child wasn't injured that badly, but I mean, you did need medical treatment where an ambulance had to be called. And thankfully we had somebody in the stands, but you can't always count on a medical provider or professional being in the stands. So I really think it's an important component, and I think we should be pushing forward to as an inclusion in any shape, way, or form. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Connors, I appreciate it. So we'll keep that on our horizon, and maybe, Matt, maybe you can consider that or float that through the Finance Committee as a opportunity to fund that. Thank you. Does anybody else have additional questions or need additional time on the personnel items? I just want to welcome our new science supervisor, Kristen Crawford. Kristen, if you want to just give a wave so folks can put a name to a face. So welcome aboard, thank you. Good stuff, exciting things to come, and welcome aboard.
Well, it's not official yet. Yeah.
Not official,
It's
but
not official yet.
give us a minute.
Not that we're tipping our hand.
Does anybody else have any additional questions for Ms. Grant or Ms. Clark or Dr. LaSousa? No, seeing none. Mr. DeQuille, would you mind?
Agenda items A1 through A19. Mr. Gilfillan.
Yes.
Ms. Ciccarelli.
Yes.
Ms. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Connors.
Yes.
Ms. Kenny.
Yes.
And Ms. Weber.
Yes.
Agenda items passed 6-0.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Moving on to Finance and Facilities, Mr. Gilfillan.
Yes, I would love to move action items B1 through 30 on your regular agenda.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Multiple pages long, as Pete indicated before. Most of these are around the ESIP program and the approvals associated with that, including an insurance policy to make sure we meet all the figures. And from a number of different donations, thank you again for the Chatham Education Foundation. There is a one-up today from the Chatham High School PTO, who put in a total of almost $44,000. As we continue to add a number of different things, one is a new sign for the front of the high school. And secondly, most important, is the addition of another 84 Chromebooks. So, Mike, we're keep marching up the ladder in terms of number of overall Chromebooks for the school district. A Cub Scout donation in the amount of $300 to purchase books for the school library at Washington Avenue School. A Lafayette Avenue School PTO donation of about $14,000 for a number of different things to support a number of initiatives for the One Book, One School, and Teaching Diversity through Children's Literature Initiative, all different kinds of things for Lafayette Avenue School. Charitable donation to Lafayette Avenue School in the amount of $100 from Tom Jan through the Morgan Stanley Annual Appeal and Charitable Spending Program. A very interesting one, I think the biggest one I've seen in my, I don't know how long I've been on this board. Amount from an individual, a couple, Lisa and Brian Margolis, did I pronounce that correctly? The amount of $10,000 to Lafayette Avenue School to be used at the discretion of the principal. That's a phenomenal personal donation, and one that is very exciting. And again, I think the largest I've ever seen in my years here. And last but not least, Chatham Music and Theater booster donation in the amount of $4,130 for the purchase of items to support the performing arts program. So exciting things continue to happen in terms of the support of our school system through the incredible PTOs. We thank them very much, and it is, I believe, a phenomenal seal of approval in terms of the commitment to our school district here in Chatham.
Thank you, Matt. Does anybody else have any additional questions for Matt or Peter?
If I may.
Sure thing.
Getting back to the very generous gift by the Margulies family, use at the discretion of the principal. There's some guidelines that the principal will have to spend $10,000. You know, I want to see a new sprinkler system in there. But will there be some discretion?
She offered to put it toward a second athletic trainer.
Perfect. We're well within the guidelines then.
Other guidelines?
The threshold, like, in terms of CEF and some other, and I think even board policy speaks to this, there's a threshold of $10,000 for building principals, if I am not mistaken. But Ms. Russo has a series of items that she's discussed throughout the year with the PTO and with me, so she'll narrow that down to something that will work well for the students there and make a determination. If I'm not mistaken, that same family, if I'm not mistaken, that same family did the same thing last year at Southern Boulevard School.
To confirm, they did make that same same monetary donation last year to Southern Boulevard.
Oh.
Wow, seeing a trend here.
Nice trend. Mr. Connors, your question was answered?
Yes, thank you.
To your satisfaction?
Yes.
Any additional comments or questions for Peter or Matt? Seeing none, Mr. DeQuilla, would you mind?
Agenda items B1 through B30. Mr. Gilfillan.
Yes.
Ms. Ciccarelli.
Yes.
Ms. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Connors.
Yes.
Ms. Kenny.
Yes.
And Ms. Weber.
Yes, thank you.
Agenda items passed 6-0.
Thank you. Moving on to curriculum, Ms. Kenny.
Yes, I'd like to move action item C1 for vote.
Second.
And that's in our folder?
Yeah.
Yes, I see it. Thank you. Thank you. And does this close out the year, or will we see one more because of this week?
Knock wood, we've got 4 more days to go, and we won't see another, but we'll see.
Another one. Okay, I'm with you. Does anybody have any questions on the 1C1, on the report in your folder? Nope, seeing none. Mr. DeQuilla, would you mind?
Sure. Agenda item C1. Mr. Gilfillan.
Yes.
Ms. Ciccarelli.
Yes.
Ms. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Connors.
Yes.
Peter, I'm sorry, can I make one quick correction? I think there's just an error on your report
Yeah.
for number 49. Should be a yes instead of a no.
Okay. Got it. Everything else stays?
Yes, I believe so, sorry about that.
Okay, sorry, Peter, would you mind just starting from the top on that one?
I will, with the noted correction to the report by Dr. L'Souza. Agenda item C1. Mr. Gilfillan.
Yes.
Ms. Ciccarelli.
Yes.
Ms. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Connors.
Yes.
Ms. Kenny.
Yes.
And Ms. Weber.
Yes.
Agenda item passes 6-0.
Thank you. I'm just checking to see policy.
There is.
None?
There is one for two.
Oh, there is. Who's on the policy committee? Oh, thank you. Rich, you'll do it?
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to move on policy action items D1 and 2 on the agenda.
I'll second that.
Just want to note that D2 is a resolution that permits the school district to work with the Morris County Prosecutor's Office to bring in the K-9 unit to conduct sweeps at Chatham High School. This resolution does not mean that there definitively will be a drug sweep at Chatham High School tomorrow or anytime in the future, but it is one of the requirements that we must meet in order to engage the prosecutor's office. So we're, as you know, all year long we have been trying to raise awareness about critical student issues. We've had pretty much a monthly parent forum or parent program, some related to substance abuse, others related to other issues. We continue to try to be as proactive as we can about critical issues that affect students and their well-being. And so this is another option that we are actively discussing right now to make sure that our schools are drug-free, safe places for students to come and learn.
Mike, is that open-ended or is there a time frame on that?
I believe it's open-ended. If there's a time frame, I imagine it would be like within a year,
So this would appear every year, potentially.
potentially.
And is it still the prosecutor's office? I believe, or I thought they kicked that to the sheriff's office. I could be mistaken, although I do have some inside intel on that.
You probably would know better than I would, so perhaps maybe we should amend the resolution to say prosecutor or sheriff.
Do they now need a warrant coming from the prosecutor's office?
No, I believe, it was my understanding that the two prosecutors ago kicked that to the sheriff's office. You know, but certainly double check.
Okay, so why don't we just note prosecutor or sheriff on the resolution just to be,
And do we know if these searches would be done when children are not in the building?
Not in the building.
Correct.
Correct.
we have the ability to determine
them
how
from the
to, right, and we'd have further discussion about what we would do. There are various ways to conduct a sweep, and I've been in contact with some other superintendents who have done it. So we would do it in a way that would ensure our students don't feel uncomfortable or out of sorts.
Does anybody have any additional questions on either policy 1962 or K-9 searches? Mr. DeQuilla, would you mind?
Agenda item D1 and D2 as corrected. Mr. Gilfillan?
Yes.
Ms. Ciccarelli?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Connors?
Yes.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
And Ms. Weber?
Yes.
Agenda items passed 6-0.
Thank you. We have our first opportunity, no, I'm sorry, we have we're going into board business. But before we go to board business, we're doing something else. Okay. Did you want to address a topic first?
I want to address a different topic.
Yes,
other than-
I was going to ask, do we have any other board business leaving the election toward the end of the board business? So Michelle, you want to lead us off?
I do want to just loop back about the speaker series that was here in Chatham. I did attend all three, as did my children in various capacities. I think something that we really touched on with these are lessons and conversations that children could not have possibly have gotten in the classroom. It was really great to hear the questions that the students had, their level of thinking, the empathy they had for the different speakers. And, you know, I think that anyone who was at any of those speakers, although they were different, walked away, even myself as an adult, thinking about things differently. I know just my 11-year-old son, who really can only talk about the end of school right now, really had some very insightful things to say even the next day after going to two of them. And so I think these are things that we need to keep, and some of them were tough, you know, they were tough to listen to, they were hard to really kind of digest, and I think these are things that we want to keep bringing to our students, that, you know, sometimes there are obstacles and that we have to dig deep and we have to keep going forward. And anyone who's been coming to board meetings a lot have heard me say again and again, we need to teach our students to self-advocate. We need to teach, as a parent, we need to teach our children to go out there and to seek solutions. And I think every one of these speakers in their own way said the same thing. You know, look for ways that you can advocate for yourself. Don't look for ways that other people can do it for you. So it comes back, you know, we talk about it when we're talking about homework, when we're talking about dealing with coaches and whatnot, that, you know, we want our children to be advocates for themselves. And especially the last speaker that came, I mean, he hit it right on the head, you know, just as he's heading off to college, his whole message was that his mother, as a first grader, told him, you've got to go in there and ask for help. You know, I'm not going to go to first grade with you. And just to hear just each and every one of them give that message, I think it was amazing to have these speakers here in Chatham. It ended our year. To me, it just kind of really brought it all together to have the opportunity. And I want to thank you, you know, not as a board member, but as a parent for bringing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. They were excellent. I also attended them. And if you have an opportunity to watch they'll be posted on the website. They were really excellent. And they're not long. It's not a huge commitment of time. So if you have an opportunity, take a look at those videos. It's well worth your time.
I personally would like to see more of them next year and spread out, not just all the way at the end of the year. I think we should try to do something as a district perspective to have one a month.
We had 6, right, throughout the year?
6.
Was it 6?
Yeah, there were 6, and they were spread out. The last ones were scheduling, but
Well, these were only 3 right at the end, but then we had 8 or 9 on critical issues throughout the year. But these 3 were more inspirational,
right.
you know,
But total of 8 or 9.
yeah, even more, probably a dozen throughout the
Okay.
year we had in some way, some kind of presentation.
They were great.
From an anecdotal perspective, I've heard nothing but overwhelming response. The only comment I had that would have been viewed as a criticism was the possible publicity of it. Some families heard about it after the fact, so I think it is such a terrific program. I would just, if we can, just advertise it a little more and get it out there, because the speakers were terrific, and it can change people's perspective on things. So that would be the only comment I'd have on that.
Thank you, Rich. Any other additional comments other than the election, which, if you feel inspired to comment on? Rich, did you want to say any opening remarks, or you're good?
Just if I may, I know I must sound like a broken record with regard to this topic, and I'm actually surprised by the lack of response. I've been watching and reading the TAP on a regular basis to see if there'd be letters to the editors or inquiries to the Board of Ed. I think it's a very important issue, and I was hoping we'd get more direction and insight from the Chatham electorate, unless all these people here today are going to come up and give me their opinion.
There were 6 up-to-date emails to the Board of Ed.
But just as a reminder, the vote, the only thing we're moving to the November time period would be the 2%, which basically we're entitled to raise as a matter of law, and it's basically just keeping the lights on. It does save money, not a lot, but it's still about $10,000 in savings to the district. We will still engage in the same process with regard to demonstrations, presentations, and what have you to everyone. We still have to submit a budget to the county executive in April, so there will be a full presentation in that regard. With the exception of 1 year, since the borough and the township have combined, the budget has been approved overwhelmingly. I believe in one particular year it passed by about 4 or 5 votes, but for the most part it has been an overwhelming percentage in favor of the budget. Now, unfortunately, with that being said, only a small percentage of those people who are eligible to vote have actually come out and voted on a regular basis. I believe on a non-referendum or a non-second question, we're looking somewhere around the 15 to 20% of the people who are voting. There are about 500 plus districts in New Jersey. Only a handful still have the April vote that we currently have right now. With regard to the districts to which we are regularly comparing ourselves, none have that April vote. There's only one other district in Morris County that does. His name is escaping me right now. I apologize. Riverdale. Thank you.
Yeah, they're not K through 12 either.
Oh.
So we can't even really compare.
They're in Morris County, though.
And it's only, according to the regulations, what I was explained last time, basically it's a 4-year commitment to the proposal. that if we do agree to go with the April, November vote, if it doesn't work out, or if there is that groundswell in support, then we can always get it back into the April vote. I'm sure you all are sick of hearing me talk about it, as I am to talking about it. Thank you for shaking your head out there. So I would like to encourage other members of the board to chime in, as I asked the last time we were here.
Can I just ask one quick question, Mr. Tequila? We don't have figures yet on what it costs us to have the polls open this year?
No, the County Office of Elections still hasn't submitted those yet. As
Okay,
soon
so
as I
just for
get
those
them, I'll
people who
report those
don't
to the
know,
board.
we paid in the past, am I correct, roughly $15,000, but that was when our poll hours were about almost half what they were this year, correct?
Give me 1 second, because I think the 15 was a little high. In 2014, it was 11,200.
11,200, but we extended our polling hours by,
The polling
7 hours?
hours in the past were always from 2 p.m. to 9 p.m. This year, they were 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., so we will almost double our labor cost for the April 2015 election. But I think that will be hopefully an anomaly, and we'll go back to the hours of 2 p.m. to 9 p.m., but that's a board decision for next year.
got it, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to start with Mr. Gilfillan and invite those board members that would like to express their opinion. If you're not comfortable at this time and you're still doing research, that's fine also. So we'll start with Mr. Gilfillan, and I'll weigh in after him.
Well, I mean, still to the day right now, my opinion remains it's difficult for me to support taking away any vote. And I actually going to credit Mr. Carr with this comment. I think the community needs to go the other way, and we need to be more actively voting in certain aspects. However, that being said, I do believe we need to hear a lot more from the public in terms of what their thoughts are and what they think of the potential to move this vote and why they would support it or why they wouldn't support it. And as I said last time, if we did a second question on a referendum and said, would you like to continue to vote on this, on the budget, yes or no? And if they said yes, then I would support the public's opinion on that. If they said no, I would support the opinion on that as well. As much as it's bad to say only 17% of the public votes, so why should we bother? I just can't bring myself from a ethical perspective to take away people's opportunity to vote. It's just something I believe is core to us. I actually agree. I think we should be allowed to vote on the municipal budgets. I think we should be able to vote on as much things as possible in order to get true democratic representation. And so at this point, I would not be supportive of taking away that April election.
Thank you, Matt. So I'm going to weigh in and give the folks to my left an opportunity to think about their thoughts. So while I agree with that, I think I'm more in favor of moving it because it's the 2% that we're talking about. The 2% isn't any of the extras, the bells, the whistles. The 2% keeps the lights on. So as long as the 2% protects the citizens to ensure that any board or even the municipalities can't run amok. And anything that went above that cap would always have to go back to the voters. That wouldn't change. So the 2% allows the administration to continue and, I wouldn't say make massive improvements, but at least hope to keep things on par. Because as the expenses that are beyond our control, for example, healthcare, the 2% could be eaten up right away, and we'd always have to go out to the public for a second question or a referendum in order to do any substantial work. So I think, the process is the same. It doesn't cut out any dialogue. We still have to submit financial reports. We still have to do open public finance meetings. We still have to solicit input from the public. The only thing that it allows us to do is, move the election to November, possibly get, one citizen came up and she almost said, what's your right? What gives you the right to hold it in April when less people are voting, as opposed to moving it to November, where if you did have a second question or something really substantial, that maybe you'd get a much larger percentage of the public voting. I don't know if that's true or not, But I thought it was an interesting thought that she had, and she almost said, well, what gives you the right to keep it in April? And again, it was just thought-provoking. She wasn't weighing in one way or the other, but I thought it was interesting that she was saying that if we did have to put a second question or a referendum up, that maybe we would get a larger percentage of the public involved. And as I said, the process doesn't change in any way. We still have to submit in the same timeframes. We would still do open public finance meetings. We would still solicit input from the public. If we were doing a big project, even though it stayed under the cap, it would still go out for debate and discussion as part of the open finance meeting. So since the process doesn't change, I believe the 2% is what in fact protects all of us as residents, but also enables the administration to, at best keep up the standards, if not, exceed them, because it does tie their hands a little bit. So I would be, a counterpoint to Mr. Gilfillan's in favor of moving it to November. Ms. Clark?
Yep. I've been doing some of my own research, and just in going back, prior to me being on the board, I had many years working to kind of be an advocate for voter education in Chatham, to inform people about the issues surrounding the school budget and different legislation that could possibly negatively impact Chatham. I was in tune when this law was coming through. I felt like it was coming through quickly when it initially passed through. And, the way it rolled out, it was a law that was technically designed to protect the taxpayers and to say that, by putting this in place, that, districts, it would be more difficult for districts to go over that 2%. And if they did, it would make it more challenging, and it would invite more people to the polls by moving it to November, having it tagged to, a more high-profile election. I feel it was smart that Chatham did not jump on board when other districts did. I think it afforded us opportunities to kind of watch and see around the state. It started out with kind of a bigger number jumping in, and slowly, obviously, more and more got on board. There's only 16, but I think now it's even less than 16, right, Peter? Oh, it is 16. Left in the state, us being one of them. I am involved in education professionally. I've reached out to people I know in districts like Chatham to find out kind of a pulse from what has this law negatively impacted their districts. So, the districts I was able to reach, people who live and work in Summit, Madison, Milburn, and Mountain Lakes, nobody came back with anything negatively as of right now that it has impacted them negatively. A couple of districts came out and said the one positive thing, it said it has engaged more candidate participation. Maybe it's because it's in November, it's more high profile, people want their names, I don't know, but we in Chatham, we have a difficult time getting people to come and step up and run for the board. So they were in towns where people wouldn't even consider it. Now they have people, they have 4 or 5 people running for a contested seat. So that could be something that, that 2 different towns said that. So that may or may not be, maybe just people interested, or maybe that. Like Jill said, I think keeping, anything at the 2%, I feel like we have a great voter support. The few that do come out and vote support our budget each year. This year was different. We had something else coming out. But if you look, back for the last, 10, 12, the numbers are pretty consistent. There's a very strong support in this town for our schools. I feel like the board has put forth a good budget. I'm concerned that Chatham was capped at a lower rate than some of the districts around us when the cap came in. So, with our cap being lower, 2% for us is not always comparable to 2% than our peer district. We're constantly being compared to this peer factor group. Our dollars and cents don't always compare to what they have and when they were capped. If I'm leaning more that I don't see that it would negatively impact our district to move the vote to November. However, I do want to get more input from the public. I think we need to, is it possible to put a public question on the ballot in November? We have public questions about brief space and public questions about other things. Could we engage the taxpayers of Chatham to provide their input in that venue instead of putting it on a referendum where it is a public question, it relates to our town, it relates to our tax dollars? Is that something that could be, that we could look into to see if we could gauge input that way? People suggested a survey. I'm not sure this is a survey type item. I think this is more of a more formal gathering process. I think we need to get more input. I think 6 emails is not enough, or maybe people really aren't interested. I don't know, and I'm not to say, but if as Matt said, if people come out and say, yes, we want it moved, That's where I'm leaning, but I want to get more information from the public before we do that. That's just my thoughts.
So in my thoroughly unofficial and unscientific survey, the general sentiment was support to move the election to November, but there was strong feeling about, right or wrong, about the information being lost, and in that the process would not be as fully disclosed as it is now. And so I just think that that's something that we need to, if we decide to move down this path, that we address to make sure that everyone is comfortable that the disclosure process is as transparent as it is now, regardless of when the election, takes place. I mean, I agree with Michelle in that I'd like to get a little bit more feedback from the public in terms of where they stand about it, although I agree that my leaning right now is to vote to move the election to November.
Thank you, Lotta. And that's by statute, right, Peter? I mean, we do open public finance meetings, but, you know, the process is, it's not at our discretion. These are the things that have to happen, regardless of when the vote is.
Correct.
Okay.
The process for the budget, having open meetings, having a public hearing, having the budget reviewed by the county business officials still is mandated as to whether or not it's April or November.
Okay, thank you. I just want to address
Yeah,
Lotta's.
no, I think there was just a concern, you know, like I know the whole PTO, you'd still go to the PTOs, you'd still go to the township council meetings to make sure that everyone heard all the numbers and anything that was out there, correct?
We can do as many presentations as we think appropriate.
Maybe not 21 that we did this past year. Something less than 21. Ann, I'm sorry.
I mean, I personally am in favor of moving it. However, I am in agreement that I see no reason why we could not put, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but no reason why we couldn't put a public question on the November vote. I mean, we have till, am I correct, Mr. Jaquilla, February 1st to make the decision to change?
Your approximate date is correct.
Roughly.
Yeah.
So I see no reason why we wouldn't at least just ask the public, give them one opportunity to say, you know, yay or nay. And at that point, I think we have a very good, you know, feeling for who actually does care about it, who's coming out to vote. And if you're coming out to vote and you're voting on the question, then we gave you the opportunity to vote on it. I see no reason why we shouldn't give everybody an opportunity to vote on it and see who comes out.
Is that something that could be added to a November ballot? I'm not familiar with
Shouldn't have thrown it out without asking, sorry.
I'm not,
Okay, we'll
I
talk
don't
about it now.
Like a good idea.
know for sure. I think that you can place, a Board of Education can place a non-binding question on a ballot, but I'm not, we'd have to ask our attorney.
Is there a cost to that? I'm just, or is it a low cost? Not that the cost is a huge factor.
I doubt
but
there's a cost, but I honestly don't know. We'd have to check with our law
Okay, maybe we
firm
can do
and have them.
a little
do it.
research. Yeah, worth exploring.
When's our next meeting?
Next board meeting's July 22nd or 20th, something like that.
If we have the answer to that recently,
Definitely.
well then.
I can get that.
We can do what seems to be a pretty good idea.
Sure.
Sorry.
Very good. Okay, very good. I think the board that's still here has weighed in. We have our second opportunity for public commentary. If you wouldn't mind stepping up to this mic, and if you would sign in and just introduce yourself and where you're from.
Sure, hi, I'm Mary McNick, and I'm from the borough. Lincoln Avenue. Yeah. I just thought, I'm here with this, with the other group with respect to the math program, but I'm listening to the moving of the vote, and, you know, I'm public, so I have a comment to make, and I would be in favor of moving the vote to November, really for two reasons, and the first one would be to save money. If the number is $10,000 to $11,000, and that's about 1,000 kids in the middle school right now, that's $1,000 a child, that's pretty good. And the second is, I think it would increase voter turnout, because obviously more people come out to vote in November, and it's an additional question. So I think it would be very positive, those two aspects. The third point that I would just make, that if you did decide to put it on the ballot as a question, I would frame it in, are you in favor of moving the vote to November, or having the vote in November, instead of saying, are you taking away an April vote? I would, because you're not taking away a vote, you're just moving. the vote. So,
Well, just to clarify, if the district, just like the town council, stay under the cap, there's no vote on the general operating budget. The vote would only be on any items above that cap.
so you're, right, which is what you've been saying. You're voting on the 2%.
Over 2%.
Over 2%.
The two, as long as the district, just like the township and the borough, stay under the cap, we wouldn't need that item to go to a vote. So currently in April, when you voted, there was the first question was always the general budget, and then any second questions or referendums would fall after that. It's that first line item that would not appear in November if the district budget remained under the 2% or under the cap.
Well, don't forget, we do have bank cap, and then we also have extraordinary items.
So on whatever the cap is,
Healthcare is an extraordinary item, which we could, I think there's 3 things, Pete, that we can be above 2%. That's healthcare, enrollment growth, and then one other.
so I just wanted to clarify your,
Okay, let me just make sure you
Sure
clarify. All right, so then, is there always an April vote?
currently there is, yes.
So there's always an April vote, but the budget would be moved.
No.
The April vote would go away, and what was in the April vote that was not part of the operating budget, which is anything above the 2%, any referendum items, any voting for board members that are running, that would all be moved to November. There would be no vote in April, and anything above and beyond the 2% would be a line item in November. If the budget remains at the 2% cap or less, there would be nothing to vote on for that item.
So, and that's how you save the money, is what you're saying?
That's correct.
Okay, yeah, I think that's clear. So,
Okay, I just wanted to
Thank you.
clarify that. Thank you.
okay.
Any additional public commentary?
Good evening. My name is Diane Politano. I'm a concerned parent. Just wanted to comment on the 8th grade math program. It's my first time here, so I hope I'm doing this in the right manner. I have only recently joined the bandwagon of Facebook and learned about this survey, so my points have not been reflected in previous surveys that you may have seen. But I just wanted to let you know what a tough year my child had. Went from being an 85 average math student last year in 7th grade to now failing math tests repeatedly. I have 2 older children who have gone through the middle school and had a much different experience. By November, I was seeking the help of his counselor and math teacher. He was able to get into the Excel math program, which gave him twice weekly additional help during study hall when it alternates. That was not enough. A month later, he had a private tutor. Luckily, I already had a tutor for an older child who was willing to take him on mid-year. Often difficult to find someone to help you, especially with the new Common Core math curriculum. Even some of the teachers have not been able to help him. Despite going to Excel, they weren't even able to answer questions for him. Sought the help of his teacher twice a week. You will note that grades on Genesis are often inflated because while it was wonderful that my son got opportunities to retake test questions with the help of his teacher, up until now, grades were inflated in his math tests because they were not reflective of what he could do on his own. And since then, this marking period, he hasn't gotten a lot of opportunity to do that, and test grades are repeatedly in the 50s, despite hours of private tutoring, which I have been more than willing to pay for and fortunately was able to give him. And by December, I knew he would be repeating algebra next year, which I was fine with it if that's what he had to do. But frankly, I feel that this year was a waste. This group setting is not working. The teacher putting one problem on the board while students are trying to teach each other. Often the work in Algebra 1 was actually reflective of Algebra 2, sometimes Algebra 3, which may be part of this whole Common Core with advancing their math skills. But given one lesson on concepts that my sophomore and junior were doing in high school. In 8th grade, you can't expect them to do things like piecewise functions, invisible numbers. With maybe 15 minutes of classroom instruction, the child would come home unable to even do his homework. So this is not working. I feel that it was important for me to tell you my story so that people who have kids coming into this next year, I heard a little bit at the beginning of the meeting that perhaps you're moving back to more of a statewide curriculum, but I'm frankly concerned at the high school. I've tried to ask a few times, the principal there, Mr. Grove, felt that perhaps it would be more of a traditional learning environment next year. But I'm just wondering, will he be successful next year going into a traditional environment where hopefully he'll have a book that he can bring home so that, as in the past, I was able to open up a book and help my child see an algebra problem and actually go online and look at the book and teach it to him, coming home with a one-page worksheet with no examples for a parent or even an older sibling to help them. It actually affected other parts of his work. How can you go and concentrate on Spanish or science when you know you're going to walk in and fail that math test tomorrow despite 2 hours of prep work? I've felt fortunate to get help from his teacher. She retired mid-year. The new teacher seems very nice, but frankly, it's just not enough. And I think that there's been a lot of commentary and even just discussion among parents in his own class that I've spoken to. How can an 8th grade student in a regular algebra class be given the same work that, frankly, the honors group is getting? And I saw this with my own eyes. I pulled up 2 different agendas for a test. The honors program was almost identical to the regular algebra class. The difference was they were about 3 days ahead and were teaching themselves even more than my student had to teach himself. And, despite a conference call with the teacher, there really wasn't much to do mid-year, and his performance has just continued to drop throughout the year. So he's looking forward to, having a more traditional environment next year, which I hope, Dr. LaSousa, perhaps you can confirm, and the board, is that going to be the case, that there'll be a traditional learning environment for algebra? And is the high school prepared to deal with perhaps an influx of students who need to take it? Like currently, I only see one algebra teacher who teaches Algebra 1 at the high school. I just happened to look up who he'd been assigned to. And frankly, having 3 sessions for parents to come at the beginning of the year to learn about this, and 20 people were allowed to come to each session, there was not enough input given to the parents about it. And I think given the numbers of kids who I understand in his class were failing, you might have had like a 20% number of children in a bell curve. I don't know if an Algebra 1 class should be operating on a bell curve where you might have 20% of 24 kids failing a test. And frankly, I'm glad that there were some kids who were getting 100. You might have 2 or 3 kids who had an 80 or 100, but I think that there was a big number of kids who were struggling, and maybe the school board should have had more opportunities after school. Hey, we're having a session today. Do you want to come and work on your homework? Instead of having to rely on the kid to go up to the teacher. Are you going to be here at the end of the day? Can I stay and work with you? Which most teachers were very accommodating in my son's case. But maybe it's great that they offer a cooking class, but maybe the school could have offered, come and, work for an hour in an organized fashion, not to rely on the student going up and, hoping to get help at the end of the day. Suddenly, the day before a test, when you realize that you don't know how to do something. So just some thoughts for going forward, and any feedback you can give me on hope for next year would be great.
Okay, thank you. Just a question. Did you happen to be here during the beginning of this meeting?
I walked in a few minutes late.
Did you hear Ms. Kenny's report?
No.
Okay.
All I did was read some things on Facebook about, the problems with the math program.
Right, and we did address that. I don't know, I don't want Ms. Kenny to repeat her entire report, but we have heard the concerns, and the administration is addressing, the concerns that are being brought forth by some of the, the parents and some of the folks out there, so we are definitely addressing those concerns.
Right,
I can't talk to the, 9th grade, the question that you had on algebra, but if you want to watch the video, Ms. Kenny did a...
No, I will. I did assume that many of the questions were being raised about even issues in the younger grades, so I wasn't sure how much had been talked about with 8th grade. So that's why when I started, I said I hope that I hadn't been repeating something.
And the concerns are not, I guess my point is the concerns are not falling on deaf ears. We're hearing it, and the administration is addressing it and making changes, and we are in fact bringing in a new math supervisor who we spoke about a little bit at the beginning of the meeting, and So, Dr. DeSouza, did you want to add, or? I can't speak to the algebra, I'm not sure.
There are a number of specifics that I can't really get into right now, but we have usually in a typical year 1 or 2 teachers who teach Algebra 1. I'd be confident that that person or people will assess your child and the others and provide the appropriate educational experience so that they move forward and progress every bit as much as you hope that he and they do.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Politano.
Hi, Kelly Lufro again. I apologize for speaking twice, but I wanted to just add to the curriculum conversation in that I think if it was possible to add a little bit of time in those open forum or the open board meetings, curriculum meetings, to add question and answer time from the parents so other parents can hear what questions people have, and possibly even having them submit questions ahead of time so that there could be a little bit of prep, or you could see if there's consistency among the questions. So those would be my suggestions, possibly half hour longer with some question and answer time, I think would be really valuable.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate that.
Jane Devlin, Chatham Township. Excuse me. My comments speak to the earlier public section and the curriculum liaisons. I think the public curriculum information meetings are valuable and essential, but it shouldn't be an either-or. The public meetings and videotaping of same are one communication forum, but having curriculum liaisons implies having someone who will carry parents or community members' concerns, queries, issues, or suggestions, and speaks to a more inclusionary approach of the community with the school district of the Chathams and the board, more integrative, something many special interest groups who have come before the board have requested. I would want a curriculum liaison and would want these liaisons to attend each curriculum meeting or at least one time a month instead of just quarterly. So now, if no one chooses to come to the curriculum public sessions, nor if they choose to reach out to their liaisons, if the liaisons are reinstituted, then that's their loss. But we shouldn't use that as a reason to curtail having a representative. For example, I might not ever contact my senator or assembly person, but I do want them representing me in the government.
Thank you, Ms. Devlin.
Hello, my name is Patty Hart. I live in Chatham Borough, and I also wanted to voice my concerns about the math program. I was here for the entire meeting, and I did hear, but I guess I just wanted a little more clarification. By way of background, I have 2 children that are in the high school. One graduated from high school, one's in the high school. I have a current one graduating from 8th grade now. He has been through the CMP3 math program for 7th and 8th grade, and it has been a disaster for him. He is an A student, never had to have a tutor before, and now he does. I understand that, you know, the same concerns Mrs. Politano. I'm a certified public accountant. I tried to help him with his math, and I couldn't do it. I think we need a textbook. I understand that you're going to try to get some resources on the website, but I heard hopefully by September. I think it's imperative that we need some resources by September, because I have an incoming 6th grader, and that's my real concern. For my 8th grader, he's now going on to the high school, and I've been very happy with the instruction in the high school to date because they are being taught. The group learning does not work for my son, did not work in the middle school, and I'm afraid it's not going to work for my 6th grader going through. They're both in accelerated math, and they have both gone, even my 5th grader, they've both gone from having math being their favorite subject to one that they hate. So I just would like a little more clarification about what will be available in September with the changes, because I heard hopefully, and I just wanted clarification on that.
That's yet to be determined. So we are appointing a math supervisor tonight. I received an email earlier this evening that I'll respond to tomorrow. And we will, we've been already looking at various resources and some additional, professional development opportunities for our teachers. We will have additional resources available by September, for sure, but I couldn't tell you right now what exactly those resources would be.
Okay, whether there'll be a textbook, more support or something on the website. So you're just not sure at this point?
I wouldn't commit to anything right now. It will not be that we're abandoning this program and have a whole new textbook series. That I can tell you.
No, but the additional support rather than just
Correct.
a worksheet to come back
Correct.
with. Yeah, okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any additional public? Oh, sorry, I didn't see you in the chair.
My name is Suzanne Harkins, and I'm from Chatham Township. I have a current 7th grader who's in advanced math. And although she does great in math and she's a very hard worker, she too has lost her love for math. In 6th grade, she basically taught herself math with me helping. We would go on Khan Academy. We would, spend hours trying to figure out the best way to teach her. In 5th grade, Mrs. Bakor was the most amazing teacher she ever had. Told me that Haley's love for math was just incredible. But she no longer cares for math. She actually prefers English now, which is maybe not a bad thing, but she hates math. She did not enjoy teaching all of the other students in 6th grade. She does very well in math, but she got attitude from her peers. I think 6th grade is very young to do the peer teaching. Maybe 7th and 8th grade, it could be done a little more, maybe a little less in 6th grade. I just think that as a board, you need to know how many people are really suffering. I mean, my daughter has not suffered in grades. She's still in honors math. She does very well. She has a friend who is, her mother is a single mom. She works. She's now been in 7th grade. She'll be put in algebraic expressions next year. Her mom can't afford a tutor. Her mom's asked me to help her daughter, and, I've offered that I will help her over the summer. So there are a lot of people that are suffering, and parents don't know where to go. There's no extra help. There's no homegrown curriculum. We've reached out to so many different districts, listened to what they have to say. We call administrators. They talk to all of us on the phone. They're open. It's transparent, and that is what we need, and that is what we need from the board. So we're asking you for your help. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there additional public commentaries before we close the meeting? Yep.
Yes, good evening. My name is Joyce Martinson. I'm from the borough. I want to thank Mr. Gilfillan for his comments. I totally agree with him. I also got permission from Steve Georges, who wrote an email to the board, was not able to come tonight, and he was asking me to read it to you folks. He says, please note that I am absolutely opposed to moving the Board of Education election to the general election cycle if it eliminates the right to vote on the annual budget. It's a $67 million budget, and there's no material justification whatsoever for this. We need more voting, not less, especially in the light of the referendum and, frankly, trust issues of last April. It is clear from the results of the last April's election, when there are large stakes and opposing views, election participation will rise. Please work to have greater communication, openness, and inclusion. I ran through the agenda for your meeting tonight, and there was no mention I could find of your budget election change with the visibility that such a big decision should have. Also, the board needs to, he goes on to other things, but he would like to thank you, and he just wanted his comments known. I agree with him totally. It's not so much the 2%. I think that with our taxes the way they are, I think there's almost 70% of our tax money goes to the school board, and I think that the public should have the right to look at the budget every year and decide not only if there is a 2% tax, but how it's spent, how the money is spent. I don't think the most important thing is the 2% cap. And I think, if I understood from a couple of the meetings, that if you stay under the 2%, you can carry that number forward. So in a few years, you might have, 3% that you can use without. I didn't understand that. And I think that it has to have more public notification. The fact that you mentioned it here, Mr. Connors, people do not see this on the TV, and a lady at the last meeting mentioned, put it out there on the website, or send out an email, or maybe a letter to the editor from the board about asking the public, go the other way, I just think that the public should have the right to vote, as Mr. Gilfillan mentioned, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Martinson.
What was the name of the gentleman whose email you just read?
Stephen Georges from the borough, Steve George.
Thank you.
Georges.
And I did forward it to you, Rich. Just a comment on his comment that it wasn't on the agenda. We have literally talked about it every single meeting since April 27th, and at the end of each meeting, we say we're going to talk about it at each meeting.
You talk about, but is it on print?
It's in the agenda, and it's in the minutes of every meeting since April 27th.
Okay.
Every single meeting we've talked about it, and we've said we're going to continue to talk about it.
Hi, my name is David Palmieri. I'm a resident of Chatham Township. I'm here tonight for the math curriculum, so somebody over here was good enough to organize something that got me out tonight. It's the first time I've ever been to one of these meetings, and I've attended the entire meeting tonight. So I did hear Ms. Kenny's comments earlier tonight, but to be honest with you, I have no idea what is being done about the math situation based on her comments. So if you could please clarify, because I don't think anybody here is also clear on what's being done. So I understand that as a supervisor has been hired. What exactly does that mean, and what can we expect from that?
I don't know if you or Ms. Chase want to...
And I'm sorry, I should clarify. I have an 8th grader, a 6th grader, a 2nd grader, all boys. The most common math grade for my 8th and 6th grader are Fs. That was not the case 2 years ago. My 8th grader can tear down a computer and rebuild it. He can code it. He is a STEM kid, and this program is failing him. I don't send my kids to school to be educated by other kids. It's not Lord of the Flies. I can send them to be educated by teachers. That's why I send them there. The program's not working, and I've been patiently listening tonight, and I've not heard anything that gives me confidence that our concerns are not falling on deaf ears. So I'm looking for clarification about how the board is addressing the concerns, which are very real here, among the parents that are present and those who cannot attend. I'm a busy man. I work in New York City. It's not easy to come to meetings like this or to come to elections on off-cycle times like in April.
As do we.
Yeah.
Work in the city and other...
Yeah.
But that's really for... The board is not going to address that comment, but that's more of an administrative function. So I'm going to pass that to either Dr. LaSousa or Ms. Chase.
Well, so the question about the supervisor, that's just to say we've had a couple of points of turnover in the district over the second half of this year, from a principal vacancy to a couple of supervisor vacancies. One of them is a mathematics supervisor. So we've been without that position for the past few months. And now that we have that person on board, what we're discussing is additional parent outreach, additional engagement, additional resources that we have been looking at, additional professional development for teachers, which we have provided in the past, but that we will continue to explore new opportunities for them. I will defend our teachers and say that I've been in multiple math classrooms this year, as has many of our other administrators. Our teachers do teach. They teach, and whether it's the K-5 math program, which some folks are critical of, or it's at the middle school level, it's not as though our teachers are sitting in the back of the room doing nothing. Of course, our teachers are working hard in teaching. It's not to say that we have a perfect program in place at CMS or any other place in the district. We do want to improve, and we have certainly heard the feedback from you and the others who have spoken tonight, and others before this evening. And so as we enter the summer mode now, and we are able to position ourselves and plan and have meetings as we gear up for September. We are committing to have in place a number of improvements to hopefully improve communication, improve the student experience in the classroom, so that there is a better partnership between the school and parents, and we can move forward in a productive manner.
Well, I'll certainly look forward to that. Again, nobody's here complaining about the science curriculum or the English curriculum. Math is the issue. You know, more work for parents, I think, is respectfully not the answer. I'm already paying for mathnasium and tutors and all kinds of things that you know, should be happening in the classroom. So we'll look forward to hearing what will be done.
Is there additional, I just want to gauge the time. Are there additional folks, raise of hand, in the audience? Mr. Carr? Anybody else beyond Mr. Carr? Okay, so we'll take this young lady and then Mr. Carr.
Hi, my name is Susie Schwinghammer. I'm from the township. I have a...
I'm sorry, I apologize. Would you mind repeating your name?
I'm sorry, Susie Schwinghammer.
Thank you.
I live in the township, and I have two boys, 6th and 8th grade. And I didn't want to add to, I did not hear Mrs. Kenny's report, so I apologize. I was not able to get here on time. And I wasn't going to say anything because of that, but I have to speak out on one point that Dr. LaSousa just said. Not all your teachers are teaching, okay? I attended your seminar in November. I was one of the lucky 20 that was able to attend. I spoke in depth with Ms. Chase at the time. Michelle Clark was there. I know she understood a lot was going on. This regarded my 8th grader's teacher at the time. Thank you. The issue was addressed. She's gone. He's moved on. He's done a lot better in his class. With the help of a tutor, I feel like he's back up to speed, and he's anxiously looking forward to going to high school. My 6th grader, however, is now failing math. So I thought maybe it was just the teacher when this started happening in the beginning of the year. But it's not. My 6th grader is an honors math student. He's not an excellent student, anything else but math. So the fact that he now wants to drop out of honors is a concern to me. He's gone in for extra help repeatedly. He fails the test. He takes the repeat test. He bumps his grade up sometimes. And the answer he gets from his teacher repeatedly is, you're an honors student. You should know this stuff. That is not acceptable to me, Dr. LaSousa. You know, it's just not. I don't know if it's a teacher thing. I think a lot of it is. Both of my kids have both had teachers who have either retired or are retiring right now. I don't know if it's an age thing and they're just not willing to embrace it, or they're not getting the new concept. But I urge you to not blindly go in thinking my teachers are all doing a great job, because they're not. They're just really not. And for my kid to come home and say, please take me out of honors math because I keep getting told you should know it because you're an honors student, it's just not right. He shouldn't be teaching himself math. If he doesn't know something as an honors student, he has every right to ask, help me learn this thing. Yes, I'll grasp it, but I need to be taught it. I can't teach it myself. And I don't care if he's in honors, if he's in remedial math, what level math you're in, you're entitled to be taught your math thing and not have to rely on the kid next to you. So I just wanted to pass that on, because that was, when I heard you say that, I'm like, they're just not all teaching. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Carr? Oh, you want to be last?
I'm Kelly Carney, and I sent a nice note to you, Dr. LaSousa. And I said I wasn't going to speak, but just to add on to what Susie said, is I've talked to some teachers, and they thank us for the advocacy work that we're doing, because they don't like this program either. They have a hard time teaching it. I think the resources for them are as deficient as they are for us as parents and for students. I know that there's a dashboard, a CMP3 dashboard, that's available that we paid for that hasn't been rolled out. I think it's frustrating for them because they're not getting the homeschool connection that I think that they would like. So just in my random sampling of talking with teachers, they're not happy either. And I'm not going to name names, of course. And we really do hope for change soon.
Thank you, Ms. Carney. You guys didn't raise your hands before.
I know, I'm sorry. I'm going to, Marianne Hauk again, Chatham Township. I'm going to be quick. I know we're all tired, and I appreciate your time, but I'm here, so I'm going to echo a few things. And many of you know We have 3 children. We've been here 20 years. My daughter just finished her freshman year, first year at University of Chicago. Extremely challenging place, but she went extremely well prepared, and that is a huge kudos to, you know, what my kids have been given over the last 18, 19 years in this town. The community, the schools, the teachers, the other, you know, it's phenomenal. So that served her well. My son is graduating senior. Again, great, I think, success story. He needed early intervention when he was 2 years old. He had a complete hearing loss and complete loss of language and had to learn to speak from the ages to 2 to 5 years old to learn his colors. Chatham was phenomenal. I can't imagine if he'd been anywhere else where he would be right now. And for any of you who know my son, it is just a great, great success story. And that was Chatham all along. All the his IEP and all the help and all the assistance and learning and teaching that he got all the way. My 3rd child is finishing 8th grade. Some of you may know, another different case. She has epilepsy, and she's gone through a lot of health issues and brain surgeries. And when it comes to math, it's interesting because of her doctors. I've always thought that she was deficient in the math and struggled with the math because of her own situation. But I have to tell you, over the last 1, 2, 3 years, even with every bit of help she's gotten and thousands of dollars of, of tutoring, and being in a resource room where it was supposed to be, you know, an environment where she was getting that directed help that my son got that did work for him, I was hearing the exact same things that other people are saying. So I'm thinking there's got to be some truth here, because she would come home and say the same thing. I'm supposed to be able to know how to do this. I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. My older brother, the older children would look at the work and say, "Mom, she should know what she's supposed to do." And she says she has no idea what she's supposed to do. She was completely lost. So I just wanted to echo that a lot of the things that I have heard tonight, and it makes me sad because my 2 older kids were very fortunate. And my daughter's going into the high school now, and she really basically cannot do a basic algebraic equation. So that's all, again, anecdotal, and that's kind of my story. But, it's mostly good, and hopefully we're all in agreement that we're going to find a way to. I guess I'm curious, and maybe I haven't been able to be as in-depth in this whole conversation of the last year, but, what went off track? I mean, some people, I guess in a way, say, we were doing so great, and we had these kids who were performing so well and going to these great schools and getting the good math education. I guess it's kind of now hindsight. I guess the question is, why did we change it, So, thank you very much. Thanks for your time, you guys.
Thank you, Ms. Howe.
I'm Stuart Carr from 3 Crestwood Drive in Chatham. My comments are, on the one hand, not nearly as important as what the folks are talking about here, but from a different perspective, they are equally important with respect to the right to vote. But before I get to that, a couple of sidelights. One, Mr. Gofel, I look forward to perhaps getting on your list of public input for your facilities activity, because I want to make the lonely case for the sod and the grass scenario going forward. So however you do that, getting input from the public, I'd like to be involved in that. Number 2, the Connors comment about the trainer. I think that's a great idea to have the second question idea. I guess I almost feel guilty, though, voting for that on its own. No, but again, I guess what I would suggest on something like that, and I don't know how you work this in back to Gilfil and with the arts idea, if there's a way to have a second question with a trainer and some kind of arts component, so you have not just athletics, we have athletics and art, however you could work that. It may be a little bit of a can of worms, but something for a second question where you have a couple of things and a couple of FTEs as a second question, I think would be terrific. So you have a trainer idea, an athletic component, and some kind of theater component, whatever it is, that would be constructive, okay, as a second question. I think that would just, go over 90% positive, something like that. So I'm going to keep that in mind as you go through this. Are you going to do a question if you need a trainer, line item? Add something to it, kind of counter to what we did with the referendum, but something like that I think would be constructive, okay? So anyway, to my comments on the budget. First, with Mr. Connors, I made a comment after the public meeting the other evening, and I was speaking about Mr. Connors being asleep. The comment I made there was waking up last week where people started to talk about the right to vote, in addition to strictly talking about how much money do we save, how many people have moved, et cetera, et cetera. And my concern was Mr. Connors back in 2012 said the right to vote has sacred aspects for our society and should not be discarded as part of his remarks, which had a number of different things. Then in 2014, in the Chatham Courier, talking about he favored staying in April, but then if sentiments change and we could save 25,000, let's move to November. So we go from sacred aspect to if we could save 25K, let's move. And then the last couple of months, just strictly talking about moving without any reference back to the vote. So my comment about being asleep was back 3 years ago, you said the vote had a big component of this discussion, and then the last two comments didn't have quite as much priority. So that was my comment about being awake 3 years ago. So I, again, respect and appreciate the fact that you have come up and brought this out to the public, and I referenced that during the Memorial Day weekend when I copied you on an email with Ms. Weber, that I did appreciate the fact that you are, in fact, bringing this up for a public discussion. I think that's terrific. In terms of the actual public engagement, I think, again, people just have other things to do. And I know this is very important, but people, I think, do have opinions. They just can't get out here to do this. I don't have time to do this. I respect the fact that you people do it out the wazoo. I think it's terrific. But again, other people just don't take the time to get out and voice that. And again, I disagree with our young lady over here. I favor April. But I think the best thing is we're now in a situation with the 2 or 3 of you saying, let's have it to vote. That's what I've argued from the get-go. I happen to say April. She says November. Terrific. But I think, again, it's an argument that the public has to decide, not the board. That's not your mandate. Like I said before, your mandate's to run a terrific school system, which you do. This, I think, is outside. Even though everybody else has it, and even though you statutorily can do it, I think bringing it out to the public, and if we vote, we want to lose our right to vote because we think saving 25,000, or we think maybe bringing other people out to November is better. Whatever the metrics are, terrific. But again, it's a public, popular vote determination, I think, as opposed to a board unilateral decision. So again, I happen to think April. I still think the right to vote trumps 25,000 and trumps all these other different considerations. But who cares what I think? I care what 12,000 people think, or whatever the number of voters is. And if we come out and do that on a referendum, ideally binding, with a interpretive question, but if we can't do that statutorily or regulatorily, then having it as an add-on, somehow we get some kind of a formal pulse, and then hopefully the board will have the ethical comment, as Mr. Gilfillan said, the ethical, duty to say this is really where we should be going, as opposed to doing it strictly amongst the board. Because obviously in the referendum, if we didn't have a referendum in April, okay, we would have had the school board, auditorium, okay? In that one particular case, it would have gone through, but for the fact that we had to vote in the public. So I think the idea of having a public vote in some cases does make a lot of sense, and I think in this case it does. And again, you can engage this debate amongst whether we should move or not, but it should be in this forum, not at that forum.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cole.
Peter, can I ask a question? If the, let's just say we put some type of public question out there or to gauge the interest of, what the intentions are, we would still have to vote. Because isn't it a resolution that we have to pass?
Oh, sure, yeah, I would think so.
But we would vote on, I just want to be clear, because you're saying let the people
Oh,
decide,
no,
but we
I'm
would
sorry.
still then have
I
to come and
apologize. No, you
vote.
folks, my understanding is you folks could make the term. You
Yeah,
can do it
that's what I was
unilaterally,
saying
let it be
all along,
listening
but
to
I'm
us.
saying-
You could say,
okay.
throw us
Yep.
out when the next election comes, we're going to vote and do
Okay,
it.
I just
You have that
wanted
right, understood. Statutorily, that's what it said for the last 3 sessions. My point there is to gauge the public on this important issue, I think is most important, and use that as part of your determination. That's what I said for 3 weeks, and that's terrific. The fact that you've brought that issue up, it's a public domain discussion, and I appreciate that comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. We have our final speaker in the, if you could just sign in while Mr. DeCola speaks, Mr. Carr will have a seat. Oh, you didn't, sorry, Mr. Carr, you didn't sign in.
I just want to clarify to Mr. Carr that even if the district did move the election from April to November, anytime there was a referendum or the district decided if they wanted to seek any future referendums, that always has to go to vote.
That's fine. All I'm saying is for this particular purpose, the public should be involved in the decision.
I understand. I heard you comment something about the referendum when you were talking, and I just wanted to verify that anytime if there was ever any future referendums, that has to be a public vote.
Understood. Okay. The issue with the referendum, again, is a public vote. That's fine. I'm saying in this particular case, have that also a public domain issue. Thank you.
Thank you. We have our final speaker of the evening for the public commentary, and then we'll close the session. Just a quick question. I'm sorry, before you continue. Dr. LaSousa, do we have an executive session? We do not. Do not. Very good. Thank you. I just wanted to double check. You're going to wrap up our evening.
I'm going to wrap up.
You're the closer.
I'm Karen Prosha. I'm from Chatham Township, and I actually was here to commend the district on sessions on anti-anxiety, mindfulness, and all the things that make students feel good. I've listened to all these parents with older children talk about the math program, and it seems to me that it's going against everything that the district is doing well in terms of anti-anxiety, in terms of being mindful and in creating stressful situations. So I'm really encouraged that there's a new supervisor. I don't know much about it. I love the fact that K through 3, we diminished the amount of homework. All of those programs sound great. I've heard a ton of people have things that they're failing when they were doing well. As a parent with kids going into the middle school, that stresses me out. It's creating anxiety for me. So I really hope that that's looked at. And if something's not working and there's a lot of complaints about it, why wouldn't we fix it?